I'm Richard Pyatt. Welcome back to the BC City Connection podcast. This is the official podcast from the city of Battle Creek, Michigan. And we're happy you're with us today, whether that's Access Vision and you're seeing us, or perhaps on YouTube, or you're listening to an audio podcast. That's part of it too. In fact, you can follow us, subscribe to the audio podcast where you get podcasts. Maybe that's Apple, Spotify, one of those. The BC City Connection podcast is there. Residents in Battle Creek will be, if not already, having received a mailing from the water department in Battle Creek, and you're probably accustomed to seeing those periodically. But we happen to be talking with Perry Hart today, water operator in the water department in Battle Creek, about that particular mailing and giving some context to what you'll be seeing in that report. Hello, Perry.
Good afternoon. Good to be with you, Richard.
Good to have you with us again. So this report that folks get in the mail, this is a periodic update of what's happening with the water that's coming out of their faucets, right?
Yeah, professionally, it's referred to as a public notice. It's a Tier 2 public notice as required by the Safe Drinking Water Act. It's just highlighting that we have the elevated trimethanes that we notified Emmett Township of last December, noticed the rest of the metropolitan area in February, and as required by the Safe Drinking Water Act, we're doing it again on a quarterly basis whenever we resample these for regulatory purposes.
And these measurements, TTHM for short, it's a long name that
Stands for total trimethanes.
yeah, there you go. This is something that happens as a result of chlorine in the water that's used to help treat the water and make it safe, and you're monitoring the after effects of that, which is a consistent thing, right?
Yeah, the water quality is monitored on a weekly and daily basis. Actually, we go out through the community and take samples for other constituents in water every Tuesday. We did it earlier today, sampling 16 to 18 different locations every week. The the sampling we do for disinfection byproducts, which total trihalomethane is part of, are done on a quarterly basis for regulatory purposes.
Hmm.
Over the last 3 months since February, we've been monitoring at different locations and much more frequently as we've started to define what has caused the increase in total trimethanes. And it really appears to be the result of the activity we had in our well field last August, where we drilled 21 new wells with the intention of replacing 22 old wells with failed casings. What we've discovered is we have a tier 2 tiered aquifer in the Verona Wellfield area. We have the upper glacial drift aquifer and the lower Marshall Sandstone aquifer. And with the failed casing, there's some interaction between those two aquifers. So we're getting organics from ground level, or the ground surface, are being washed down into the upper aquifer. They're finding their way into the lower aquifer because of the failed casings. We have a high level of confidence that when we are approved to go ahead and stick wells in the new casings that are all drilled, we are going to start taking dramatic steps in correcting this issue.
What does it mean for folks who are drinking the water, Perry, and washing in it, cooking with it, etc.? Are they to be concerned about this, or is this something that is easily handled?
Well, the health effects really should be answered by medical professionals, of which I am not. In the letter that is being sent out, there is a toxicology hotline that goes directly to the Department of Health and Human Services. They greatly assisted us in developing this letter and separating the responsibilities. Those with health concerns are certainly encouraged to call that number. Those with hydraulic concerns are more than welcome to give me a buzz. I'm happy to answer any questions they have. But the letter does state that the health concerns for infants, elderly with pre-existing conditions, or others with pre-existing conditions There are concerns that they'd want to speak with their healthcare provider on, but in most of our customer situations, total health effects caused by total trihallomethanes is going to be with long-term exposure. And we do not anticipate this being a long-term exposure situation. Once we get out of these old casings and into the new casings, we will be well on our way in correcting this and keeping it at safer levels.
And so your point, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, is that when you're doing work like this and you start stirring things up a little bit, this can happen.
Well, we, two different engineering firms, experienced water staff that we had on hand, since retired, unfortunately, we discovered what had happened. Part of drilling a new well is doing an aquifer test. That well is then pumped heavily for 8 hours straight. And actually it's pumped for longer than that. There's a time period where they're pumping it called developing the well, getting rid of all the silt and making sure that the water is clear. Then there is a minimum of an 8 hour aquifer test done on each well. And as those two pumping events happen, that water is just being discharged out onto the surface of the well field. What we discovered a bit too late was we were doing this work with a contractor in August, September, October of last year. The leaves were coming off the trees. 2019, we did a large project in our well field, removing trees that jeopardized our overhead power lines. A lot of those trees are laying in piles out in the well field, slowly decomposing. All of those activities increased the amount of organics that are on the surface of the water, or on the surface of the well field. And as we added 500,000 gallons of water from 21 wells, that water absorbed the total organic carbon in the debris that was on the surface, that being decaying trees and leaves. And it carried those carbons down into the upper aquifer, which now have the ability to find their way into the lower aquifer, the Marshall Sandstone, where we draw our source water from. So we have elevated carbons coming into our treatment process, and that reacts with the sodium hypochlorite we use for disinfection, and creates the elevated total trihallomethanes.
A temporary situation, as you've noted, but for now, this is the situation. When you process that water, what's the effect of it on the other end of that? It doesn't eliminate the issue, I presume.
I'm not sure what you're asking there.
Well, you're talking about treatment of the water in your normal treatment process, right? So this TTHM elevation still is there after the water is treated. True?
Well, that understanding the question now, water, we have made one adjustment in our water treatment plant. At our filtration facility, we changed where we were adding the chlorine. We moved it out to in front of the treatment process so that we start creating some of those TTHMs before we go into aeration. Aeration is a process of spraying water down as air is being drawn up through pieces of equipment we utilize. And we felt that by doing that, we are going to off-gas some of the total trihallomethanes. Seems to have worked considerably. We're monitoring the levels through the treatment process, and we can see that we've lowered them a bit at the very beginning of the treatment process, and we've lowered them throughout. What we've also discovered is we see bump up on the sampling we're doing. We see slight increases in that as we get these torrential downpours we've been getting. Those heavy rains are hitting the surface of the well field and washing total organic carbons back down into the upper aquifer, which then gets into our source water and creates these little blips on the radar of increases, and we can attach them to rainfall events.
Yeah. And that kind of I guess I'll call it an environmental situation, happens all the time. But I think what you're saying is if there had been less organic material in the field, this would not have been as much of an issue. Is that how we should interpret that?
I would say less of the organic matter on the surface, on the ground surface.
Yeah.
And we don't normally pump 500,000 gallons onto the ground outside of drilling new wells.
Yeah.
So when we have the new wells in operation and the old wells sealed, we are going to have a good defined layer between the upper and lower aquifer. And that way, a heavy 3-inch rain event will move total organics into the upper aquifer, but we should be reasonably sealed from that with the old wells sealed and the new wells drawing from the Marshall sandstone.
Yeah. So it's just going to take a little time to get back to what might be considered a normal kind of situation. This sounds like it just was sort of a certain set of circumstances that aligned here, and this is what we have as a result.
A little bit of a perfect storm, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It considering the engineering firms we had, the professional well drillers we were utilizing, the experience of the staff we had on hand, nobody saw this coming. In
Yeah.
fact, the one person that picked up on it, who has since retired, has a 35-year career in drinking water. And he had run into a situation similar to this at a previous community where the community was doing leaf pickup in the fall and storing those leaves in the well field.
Ah.
And they started seeing upticks in the total trialomethane. And Bob was right on. He says, I know what happened. We've done all our research, we've done our investigation, and everything points to we know what went wrong. Now we're working on fixing it. Part
So
of
what?
that fix was
Yeah.
in May when we flushed the water distribution system. That saw a tremendous decline. We went from peaks that were at our 4 sampling locations, they were anywhere from 150 to 170. We've got them all back down below 80, which is the regulatory level we need to stay below.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And the letter that's being sent out is we're sending it a little pricier this time around. We're sending it in color, and we're sending a graph with it that both defines what's going on at the treatment plant and what's going on at our 4 sampling locations throughout the distribution of Battle Creek, Emmett, and Springfield.
So generally speaking, to return and maintain those normal TTHM levels, how long do you think it'll be?
Well, the letter states 18 to 12 to 18 months yet. And the
Okay.
reason for that is we're going to have to get that water pulled out of the well field. And we can't do that effectively until we get the new wells placed into new casings and get the old well casings sealed up. We've got to create that separation between the upper and lower aquifer again. Once that's done, I have every confidence to believe that these TTHM levels will reach historic lows. Because for the 20 years, I've been with the city for 17 and a half years, but for the 20 years that it took for our casings to develop the problems that they have, deteriorate to the level they have, every hole that developed in a casing was allowing that upper aquifer water to integrate into our lower aquifer. So we've probably seen this problem coming along, and we did watch some concerning elevations of total triallomethanes over the last 5 years without being able to identify what it was until we discovered the holes in the casings.
Yeah.
And then when we did the aquifer testing and put all that water on the surface of the well field and saw these spikes, it pretty much defined, all right, we see that slow elevation. Now we've identified what was causing it, and we're on a path to correct it.
So if we were to talk about the casings, they're just for a second, they're essentially acting as a barrier between the two aquifers and thus sealing away this kind of potential in the lower aquifer.
Sure, that's fair to say. A casing is drilled down through the glacial drift, the upper aquifer. We drill through that, set the casing into 5 to 10 feet of substantial rock, which is the top of the bedrock. And then that is grouted in place. So you have created a barrier between the water that's in the upper aquifer and the surface. Then the well driller is asked to drill through that casing down to 90, 100, 150 feet, whatever the depth of the well it's replacing is. And that is bored right through the bedrock. So when a pump is put into that casing, it is drawing water from the Marshall sandstone aquifer, and it is sealed off from the upper aquifer.
All right. Now, I imagine, Perry, there's folks listening who are saying, I don't need a doctoral dissertation and in how this all works. Just tell me what I need to do. And I think we started off doing that in the sense that if there is any concern about elevated TTHM, it particularly focuses on the very young and those who are older. And if they have concerns about that, there are resources that are noted in this particular report you'll be receiving in the mail about how to go about doing that. Here's a question somebody might have, Perry, and that is, what if I just, you know, uh, use my filter in my house and filter my tap water through one of those a grocery store kind of Brita type filter things, or maybe I have a filtering system in my house, or I have one in my refrigerator. If you have water in the front, you probably do. Does that help?
There are specific filter elements that are necessary to deal with TTHM.
Okay.
We haven't included that in the letter. There's only so much we can share. The letter is definitely a template created by the Safe Drinking Water Act that we have to follow. There's 10 elements that are required to be part of that letter. But my phone number's in there, my email's address is in there. I am more than happy to provide links to filtering information should somebody want to take that step to
Okay.
protect themselves or their family. We would provide them information that is at the NSF, and they highlight different manufacturers that provide appropriate filters for dealing with TTHM.
Okay. Go ahead and give us your office number while you're at it there, Perry, and we will make sure folks know of it. And of course, it's in the report as well.
Yes, as listed in the letter, my office number is 269-966-3481.
All right, so be watching your mail for the water quality report that Perry refers to and the update on the TTHM levels and the expectations that we have just heard would be what we would expect to happen over time as this work continues. But again, if you have questions, Water Department office and Perry's number 269-966-3481. Well, we appreciate the update, Perry, and we'll stay in touch.
Great. Thank you.
Perry
Pleasure
Hart.
speaking with you.
Yeah, great to have you here too. Perry Hart with the Water Department in Battle Creek on the BC City Connection.